Hi guys, happy Tuesday to you. It is that time again where we put together some fun crafty goodness with some of our Dress It Up buttons. Hooray! I'm actually really excited about this one because this is a kind of a highly requested project. Not necessarily this project in particular, but I get asked a lot of times how to incorporate Dress It Up buttons into jewelry making, because a lot of you guys know me from Jesse James Beads, which is the sister company to Dress It Up buttons, and I design jewelry, and sometimes we include some of our Dress It Up buttons in that jewelry, but today it is all about the buttons, and I'm really excited to show this to you. We're going to create a bracelet out of some of the heirloom buttons from Dress It Up buttons. And these guys are, hey Maggie, hey Patrina, these are beautiful buttons. Dress It Up buttons has more than just character buttons, right? For everybody and every occasion. There are regular buttons as well. These are 2-hole buttons. There are a couple of shank style buttons in this package, but for the most part, these are 2-hole buttons, and I'm going to show you how to create a bracelet with those. And I might just happen to show you a couple of earrings that I've already made that I'm going to be creating videos for YouTube for Dress It Up buttons as well. So I'll give you a little sneak peek of those, but I wanted you guys to see how fun and easy it is to take some of your Dress It Up buttons and turn them into beautiful things that you can wear, right? What better way to advertise yourself as a crafter or as a jewelry maker than to wear your own creations? And speaking of which, I actually have on the bracelet that we're going to be creating today. So I'm using a combination of the Dress It Up buttons and some Czech glass beads that I got from Jesse James Beads. And I'm going to show you that better up close when we get down onto the mat, but I think this is going to be a fun one that you guys are really going to enjoy, and hopefully it's going to have you looking at buttons in a different way, right? Because buttons can be used in so many different ways. I feel like jewelry is just right in there in the mix, and we've done a lot of paper crafts. We've done a lot of just crafts in general. So this one is near and dear to me because I love jewelry. So I hope you guys enjoy this one as well. If you do not mind, before we get to it, would you please give this a share to any of the boards or groups that you are a part of on Facebook where other people are doing crafty goodness? I would really appreciate it, and so would everyone else at Dress It Up buttons. Okay, let's get to it, guys. This is going to be a fun one. So let's see, get down onto the mat. Sorry, I did not mean to have my finger in the way. Let me lift you up just a little bit. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to pick out your buttons, and of course I've picked out these heirloom buttons because they are just so beautiful. They remind me of buttons that I can remember my grandmother having on. When I was a kid, my grandmother worked at a department store, and she would always wear the most beautiful clothes, and she always had the most beautiful jewelry, and that's what this color reminds me of. I don't know what it is about this color, but it really kind of takes me back to growing up and seeing my grandmother come home from work, you know, in her beautiful clothes. So heirloom buttons from Dress It Up buttons, and then we are using some Czech glass buttons from Jesse James buttons. Now you can use any of the Czech glass buttons that are available over on jessejamesbeads.com. For this, I picked out these beautiful clear ones that have this really awesome AB finish to them, so they do have a pop of color in them, but they don't necessarily take away from the buttons themselves, because I really want the buttons to be the star of the show here. Okay, so let me show you. I'm going to take this bracelet off and show it to you so you guys can get kind of an idea of where we're going with this. So we're actually going to do a little bit of weaving with some bead stringing wire, and we're just popping those Czech glass beads on top of our beautiful heirloom buttons. So we're kind of using them as a, I don't really know how to explain. It's not really using them as a bezel, but in a sense we kind of are, because they are sitting on top, and some of the heirloom buttons do have kind of a curve there where that button, or where that bead rather, is going to really lay beautifully. And I'm using some 19 strand beadlawn wire in this silver color. Because the wire is going to show, I wanted to use something that was really beautiful to go along with the beads and the buttons, and so I picked the silver, but you could do this in gold if you wanted to, and really any kind of bead stringing wire would work. Also, you don't have to use bead stringing wire for this. That's just what I'm comfortable using. But you could use cotton cord for this. You could use, you know, you could use a needle and thread and some really beautiful thread. I would definitely use a thicker thread or go through this a few times. But you can definitely change up the materials as far as putting this together. I'm using some crimps. If you were going to use some cording or some thread of another variety, you could definitely just get away with doing some knots. And I'm using just a standard clasp here, but I gotta say, when I got to the end of this bracelet, I was kind of mad at myself that I didn't use one of the beautiful clasps that is available over on Jessie James Beads, because they have a whole assortment of really gorgeous clasps that would have gone beautifully with this as well. So, all right, everybody is coming in. There's Karen and Kathleen. Ooh, Eslon. Kathleen, you are so right. Suzanne, so glad to see everybody. Teresa, Robin, Wanda. You guys, thank you so much for supporting me over here on Dress It Up Buttons, as well as your support over on Jessie James Beads as well. I'm just glad that you guys kind of followed me on over here to do some crafty goodness, you know? It's very much appreciated. Okay, so as far as the bead stringing wire is concerned, ooh, Maggie says silk. Silk would be amazing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to just jump right off topic, but the Eslon, that was a really good suggestion, and the silk would be really cool too. And the reason the silk would be such a good thing to do this with is that a lot of the silks come on a card and they've got a needle attached to one end, so that would make this really quick and easy and would be really, really beautiful. And you'd have a really nice drape too if you were using the silk. Okay, so the bead stringing wire is what we're going to use, but you guys see from all of the suggestions that we've got, there are a lot of different things that you can use. I'm using this, and I've taken about 30 inches of this. You might need a little bit more. It really is going to depend on how long you need your bracelet to be. I made mine to fit. It's about a 7-inch bracelet. So for those of you who have a little bit bigger wrist or a smaller wrist, you're going to have to adjust accordingly, and definitely add or subtract some buttons to this as well. Okay, so to get started, I want to keep this as simple as possible. So I'm going to take the bead stringing wire, and I'm really just kind of finding the middle of the bead stringing wire, and I'm going to go ahead and thread on my clasp. I'm not using any extra hardware here, so I'm not using any jump rings or anything like that, but I am going to use some crimp tubes for this. So I just want to bring the clasp down here to the middle. And then I'm going to take a crimp tube. You can use a crimp bead if you want to. And I'm going to thread that on to both strands because, again, I have this folded in the middle, you guys. And then I'm going to bring that crimp tube all the way down here, pretty close to the clasp. Okay, I do want to have a little bit of wiggle room here, so you don't want to pull it up super, super tight. You want to be sure that you do have a little bit of wiggle room here. And then I'm going to take those bead stringing wires that are inside that crimp bead, and I'm going to separate those out just to make sure that they are not crisscrossing each other inside that crimp bead or crimp tube. It's a tube in this case. And then I'm going to come in with my crimper tool. Crimper tool has 2 notches on it. The back notch looks like a little piece of macaroni. That's going to be the one that we are using. So I'm going to place that crimp bead into the back notch of the crimper tool and just give it a squeeze. That is going to separate those 2 wires inside the crimp tube so that there is no friction that is happening there. Those 2 wires are no longer touching. And you can double check that by looking at the other side. You can see where we pinched down on it. Now I'm going to put that into the front crimp on the crimper tool, the little front notch, the one that's closest to the end of the tool, and just squeeze down on that just to tidy that up and make it really, really small, okay, and out of the way. So what we have is a clasp, and then we've got 2 strands of the bead stringing wire to work with, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so to get started with this, the buttons are 2-hole buttons. That's what I'm using. You could use 4-hole buttons for this, but if you're going to use the Heirloom buttons, which I highly recommend because they're so pretty, you definitely are going to be using the 2-hole buttons. So you want to take your bead stringing wire, and one of the threads you want to go up through one of the holes. Okay, you want to bring that down pretty close to where your clasp is, and then with the other bead stringing wire you're going to go down through it. So you're really just kind of capturing, see how we've captured that button with our bead stringing wire. And then just kind of wiggle everything around a little bit so that you've got your button pretty close to your crimp. Tina says, hi on a sort of cloudy day. It is sort of cloudy here too. I'm sad about it actually. Yesterday it was beautiful. I expected it to be beautiful today. It's warmer today, but we still have clouds. Use some sunshine for sure. Okay, so I have also wiggled the button around so that the holes are lined up in the direction that the bead stringing wire is going to go. Okay, you don't want it to be cocked over to one side or the other. Definitely want to try to keep those holes in line. And now we're just going to repeat. I'm holding on to the button, the 2 holes that we've already, or yeah, well, the front and the back of the first hole. Holding on to those, I want to take my top strand, that's the one that's coming out of the top of the button towards me, and I want to thread on one of these Czech glass beads. Okay, then I'm going to drop that down so that it is on top of the button, and kind of wiggle it with your fingers a little bit. At first it's not really going to want to lay perfectly on top of that button, but now you're going to take that same strand and you are going to go down through the second hole of the button. And that's going to kind of help to lock that bead in place right on top of your button. Okay, and you can see how my bead string wire is kind of going at an angle here. You can just kind of wiggle everything around with your fingers and get it to sit exactly where you want it to. Okay, be the boss of the bead stringing wire, which I say about the German style wire over on Jesse James Beads. All right, so now to hold that bead in place, I'm just going to kind of pinch it with my non-dominant hand here where I'm holding the button and the bead all together. And now I want to take the bottom bead stringing wire, and same thing, just like we did at the very beginning, I'm going to go up through that second hole. Okay, and just pull. And now you have, it looks like a little plate with a with a bead cup sitting on it, right? A little plate and a cup and saucer. Why can I not say that today? My goodness. That's kind of what it reminds me of. So that's going to be the pattern. And I know that seemed like a lot of steps, but you'll see as we go along, this will work up pretty quickly. So we're just going to repeat the pattern. So we're going to take the very top wire, the one that is coming out through the top of the button, and we want to thread on another button. So we're just going to go through the hole of another button, bring that down. Okay, and then we want to take the other wire that is coming out of the back of the last button, and we want to go up. Okay, so again, we're just kind of crisscrossing the bead stringing wire to bring that button in line, whoops, with the last button. So you do kind of have to keep some tension on your bead stringing wire, and the tension you can release just a bit as the further that you go. But here in the beginning, when the bead really wants to kind of wobble around and everything, you really are just kind of holding everything in place. But the further you go, you'll see it's not going to take nearly as much to hold everything in place. All right, so the wire that is coming out of the top of the button, thread on another one of these beautiful Czech glass beads, drop that down, and then take that bead stringing wire and go down through the second hole on that button. Okay, kind of wiggle it all into place, hold it with your fingers, and then the other strand needs to come up through the exact same buttonhole right there next to the bead. So now when you're looking at it from the side, this is what you've got. So it's really a very three-dimensional bracelet. You've got these beautiful beads that are really sitting on the surface of the buttons, and so that's going to add quite a bit of texture to this design. You can see how far those beads are sticking out as they're sitting on top of each one of the buttons, but not really taking away from the beauty of the button. If the bead were bigger, it definitely would, and you could certainly use a smaller bead here if you wanted to, a smaller Czech glass, so that you would see even more of the buttons. But I feel like using the clear here really helped not to detract from the button, but does add some sparkle to this. Okay. All right. So same thing. We've got the top bead stringing wire that's coming out of the button from the bottom. Okay. And another button is going on. So we're just threading through one of the holes, bring that button down, kind of wiggle it into place. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. It took me a second. I thought I had forgotten what I was doing there. All right, take the bottom bead stringing wire and come up through the same hole. Okay. And now that same strand that's coming up from the bottom of the button, you want to thread on, again, one of your Czech glass beads. Drop the bead down and then go down through the next hole. So we are kind of sewing, in a sense, with our bead stringing wire, because you could do this on fabric, right, with your buttons and your beads, and sew this onto a piece of fabric, and you would be working in the same pattern. Strand that's coming out of the bottom, we're going to go back up through the top here. And I don't like the way that one crisscrossed. I'm going to bring that one over here. I really want to try to keep my bead stringing wire from crisscrossing each other. If it starts to crisscross the bracelet, the buttons are going to kind of want to cock to one side or the other instead of staying in a nice straight line. So I really want them to be as nice and straight as possible. Okay. All right. Holding on, and we're just going to keep going. It's the exact same pattern over and over again. You're just going to kind of work up a rhythm with this. The top bead stringing wire, bring down a button. The bottom goes back through the same hole in the opposite direction. So you're just kind of crisscrossing, right, and pulling everything down just like that to line that button up. Turn it around so the buttons are in line with the bead stringing wire. This top strand that's coming out of the top of the button, add our bead, drop the bead down, and then go through the second hole, going down. So you can see how using a needle and thread for this, whether you were doing this on fabric or just using some really beautiful silk thread to do this, would make it much easier because you've got a needle. And since you're working with two threads, you would definitely need to put a needle on the other end, but it would make really quick work of this to use a needle and thread. All right, so that's what we've got so far. We're just going to keep on going, okay? And for my bracelet, I'm using 12 of the heirloom buttons and 12 of the Czech glass beads. If you need a longer bracelet, you would use about 13 or 14 of these buttons, but I gotta say there's plenty in the package, so you're gonna have a lot left over. There are a ton of these buttons in that package. Whoops, twist that right around here. So you're gonna have enough probably to make 2 bracelets if you wanted to. Drop that down. And any of the Dress It Up buttons, sewing buttons, are going to work beautifully for this. So you don't have to use the, whoops, I forgot to go down with this one. Any of the 2-hole or 4-hole buttons from Dress It Up buttons are going to make a beautiful bracelet in this style. So when you were working with a 4-hole button, you're still just using the 2 holes in the button that are directly across from each other and just ignoring the other 2. However, you can do this exact same project with a 4-hole button and use seed beads and create a crisscross over the top of the button, which is really pretty as well. Let's see. So Lonnie says, sorry if you already said, but what size Czech? So these Czech glass beads, I believe these are 8s. Let me double check though. Don't want to say for sure because it's possible that these are 6s, but I'm pretty sure they're 8s. These are 8s, yes. So these are 8 millimeters. And the buttons themselves, if you're curious, these buttons are 13 millimeter buttons. So you could really kind of change this look up by adjusting the size of your buttons and the size of your beads that you use. So all those little variations are going to create a very different look. All right, there's one button coming down. So I've gone through the top of it. Now I'm going to come up from the bottom. Whoops. Okay. And we've got the wires crisscrossed. Now we are going to add a bead. Drop that bead down, take that beading wire and go down through the second hole on the button. And then the bead stringing wire that's back here on the back, we're going to go up. So you're really just kind of crisscrossing up and down. There is nothing really hard about it. You just kind of work out the pattern. The most important part of all of this is just making sure that your spacing between your buttons is consistent and even. And with the bead stringing wire, you don't have a whole lot of struggle doing that. It naturally wants to lay pretty even. But if you're using something softer like a silk thread, you're definitely going to need to be really careful about the tension that you are keeping on your stringing material so that your buttons don't end up overlapping each other. Okay. So we're getting pretty close here to being done. Got about 5 more buttons to add, 5 more beads after this one. And then I'll show you how to finish this off. And then I'll give you a little sneak peek of a couple of button jewelry designs that I'm gonna be I'm gonna be recording later today. And then they will be available on the Dress It Up Buttons YouTube channel. So if you guys are interested in seeing more jewelry with buttons or just more button crafts in general, we have a ton of really great projects using all of our favorite Dress It Up buttons. This is one of those projects where I wish that I had an extra hand just so that I could let go a little bit more, but I definitely want to try to keep that tension. I don't have to pull too hard or hold on to it too tight, but I definitely don't want to let go and just let it do what it wants to do. I'm afraid that it would become a mess. All right, so I'm going down through the button after we added our bead. Kind of line that bead up where you want it to go, and then the bottom strand we're going to come up. So just repeating. Okay, top strand, adding a button. Well, okay, and then the bottom strand up through. Pull your button down in line, and you're ready to add a bead to that. Top strand, add your bead, whoops. Drop your bead down and take your strand down through the second hole on the button. Bottom strand up through the top. And if things seem to kind of wiggle out of shape as you're going, or the spacing becomes uneven, you can gently coax the buttons back into the right spacing by just kind of pushing them into the spot where you want them to go, keeping them all fairly even. And you can see what it looks like from the side, and then from the top, really a beautiful, beautiful bracelet. It's very, very unique for sure. So Lonnie says, could you use memory wire as a base? I'm not so sure. You definitely could use some flat memory wire and wire wrap this onto flat memory wire in the same kind of look. But as far as the threading goes, because the memory wire is tempered steel, it really doesn't, it's not going to want to do all of the bending and threading that the bead stringing wire is going to do. However, you could use some artistic wire for this, and you could definitely use your German style wire for this as well. And if you were going to do that, then yeah, you definitely could wire wrap the entire thing onto some memory wire for sure. I love memory wire. It's one of those wires that I forget about, and it's so easy to use. All right, getting close here. We've got 2 more buttons and 2 more beads, and then we will finish this off. So Dress It Up buttons, you guys, we have a huge selection of amazing buttons. We have sew-on buttons, we have buttons for quilting, and there are shank style buttons. There are a couple of shank style buttons in this package here. They have the shank on the back of them, and so they are perfect for just about any kind of crafting that you want to do, your sewing or your paper crafts and your jewelry making. But one of my favorite things from Dress It Up buttons is the micro mini buttons. And I'm going to show you a micro mini button here in just a second. We've used them in some of our other projects, but you could do this project with micro minis and it would be so, so cute. And the micro minis come in such a huge variety of colors that you could do a bracelet in one color, right? One whole color of the micro minis, or you could do a rainbow of colors with the micro minis. And I think it would be really, really cute. And instead of using a large Czech glass bead, you could pop a little crystal bead or a little seed bead right into the center of it. It would be so, so pretty. Oh my gosh. Ramona says, late tornado warnings in our area. Be safe, please. My gosh. That's scary. And my voice just cracked. You tell how scared I am. All right, but seriously, be safe. That's scary business. You don't mess with nature. All right, so we're right here at our last button, so I'm going to add my very last bead. Take that bead string wire down through the second hole, okay? And wiggle that little bead into place. He's not wanting to do what he's supposed to do. And then up through. And then I can let go a little bit to kind of wiggle this last button, or this last bead rather. So he's wanting to sit kind of funny. All right, so we have our entire bracelet, and we worked that up pretty quickly. So the question is, what size wire? I am using 19 strand bead stringing wire in silver color. This is the 0.46 millimeter, but you really could use just about any of these. Any of the bead stringing wires, the soft ones, would work. Definitely want to double check on the millimeter though, because you want to be sure that you're using the biggest millimeter that will fit in your bead. All right, so we're down here to the end, and we're really going to finish this off very similarly to the way that we started. but instead of using one crimp tube, we're going to use two. And again, I'm not using hardware for this. We're just going to make a loop. I'll show you. This is how I finished off the other one. So for those of you who are not necessarily jewelry makers, in place of the crimp tubes or the crimp beads, if you were using a different kind of material, you definitely would just tie a knot here. And we are definitely skipping the jump rings and all of that just to keep this as simple as possible. So I trimmed off my ends just so that they're the same length. I'm going to thread on a crimp tube, or you could use a crimp bead here. Bring that down. And again, you want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. You don't want to pull it right up next to the button. You want to have a little bit of space there. You just want to be sure that your bead stringing wire is separated on the inside of your crimp so that they're not crisscrossing and they're not necessarily touching each other, so that when you come in with your crimper tube, or with your crimper tool rather, you're going to crimp down, okay, and then crimp again just to kind of tidy that up. Okay, so we have one connection here and we need to make a loop, but we have two strands. So now that I have a nice crimp, I'm going to take one of these strands and trim it off because we don't need it. We only need one strand to make our loop with. So I'm going to come down with my cutter tool as close as I can to the crimp bead and trim that off. Now we're just working with the single strand. So again, thread on a crimp tube or crimp bead. Okay. Drop that down so that it's next to the crimp bead that you just crimped, and then you're going to take the tail end of your wire and you're going to go back down through that to make your loop. Move my fingers out of the way so you can see. Oh no! My crimp came undone. I did not get a good crimp on that one. All right, we can save it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to undo this one, and then I'm going to take one button and one bead off, just so that I've got enough bead stringing wire to work with here. Okay, so let's start over again. I don't know what happened. I didn't get a very good crimp on that. It's kind of holding it at a strange angle. So okay, again, just like we did just a second ago, bring that crimp bead down. You want to pull that down as close to the button as you can. Make sure your bead stringing wire is not crossing inside there. Use the back notch of your crimper tool to crimp down on that. Okay, and then you want to place it into the front crimp notch and tidy that up a bit. Okay, now we'll trim this off again. All right, so now we're back to where we were just a second ago before it came undone. So we've threaded on a second crimp tube. We're going to go down through with our bead stringing wire, okay, to create a loop. This is just going to be the loop where we attach, right? We're just going to hook directly to that with our clasp. And so pull that down, make yourself a small little loop. You just want your crimp beads to be as close to each other as possible, and then you're going to crimp again. So into that back notch, give it a good crimp, and then into the front notch and tidy that up. And now you can come in and trim off. And you have a super pretty button style bracelet using heirloom buttons from Dress It Up Buttons and beautiful Czech glass beads from Jesse James Beads. And you guys can see I had enough to create two bracelets, so there is definitely a lot of buttons in this heirloom package for sure. And there are a couple of shank style buttons in here that you could turn into earrings if you wanted to. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of some other things that you can do with your, oh my goodness, your buttons as far as jewelry is concerned. So let me grab a couple of these just to kind of show you, give you some inspiration. And if you want to see the full projects, they'll be available on the Dress It Up Buttons YouTube channel here as soon as we can get them edited and uploaded. So here is one of the little earrings that I'm going to be creating for a video, and you can see I've used an heirloom button. I took advantage of the 2 holes and used some jump rings here, and then here are some of those micro minis. And so this is part of the reason that I really wanted to show this to you, because I wanted you to see these little micro mini buttons and how adorable those are. And you can see how you very easily can take the micro minis and turn them into the exact same bracelet, but you can do it in a bunch of different colors and it's going to be much smaller. Just a really, really cute idea for that. So there's some button earrings that are super cute. I've got 2 more pairs here I'll show you. Just using some jump rings and an ear wire, and that's all it takes. And you've got a really beautiful pair of earrings that you could shorten up if that was too long, and it would definitely match your bracelet. And then last but not least, using the color from those little micro minis to make a really colorful pair of earrings. So yeah, a lot of different ways that you can incorporate your buttons into your jewelry making, or if you are a crafter and you have not ever tried jewelry making, this is kind of a good little gateway, right? To use your buttons that you may already have, or order some of your favorite Dress It Up buttons and turn them into jewelry and kind of get your feet wet with jewelry making. So it's really, buttons are such a great crossover product in my opinion, because it really kind of brings all crafters together. You've got your sewing, you've got quilters, you've got jewelry makers, you've got paper crafters. Everybody can take a Dress It Up button and turn it into something amazing. Dress It Up buttons are great for embellishing, they're great for personalizing, and so you know, it's really, buttons can be turned into literally anything. So all right, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I love the micro minis too. They are some of my absolute favorites. I'm gonna flip you guys back around here. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this project. I know this is very different from what we've been doing here, but I think it's important to show you guys that you can do all kinds of things with your buttons, and there are sewing style buttons available through Dress It Up Buttons, as well as the shank style buttons. So much to choose from. There is a lot, you guys. There's a lot. I love these little guys. Look at them. How cute are those? Right? Just a little pop of color, and it's buttons. It's the cutest buttons, the cutest little baby buttons in the whole world. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been fun. It's always fun. I hope that you guys are inspired and are starting to look at your buttons in all new ways, and definitely taking a look at all that Dress It Up Buttons has to offer, because Dress It Up has got a ton. There is something for literally everybody. So all right, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will be here again same time, same place next week with another fun project using a Dress It Up button embellishments for you guys. All right, have a great rest of the day. Bye.